A friend of mine that I had some business with in England moved up to Shetland. He came up and bought a croft on Papastour, which is the big island next to us. And we were talking and agreed to give it to me, and that I would just continue to be a little more active than I'd been able to do before against the UK and Scottish authorities. So first step in 2008 was to declare Forwick a Crown dependency, because that's where the history led me. And I offered my services to Her Majesty the Queen to act as her steward, which would be the official title of somebody in charge of the Crown dependency. By 2010, I'd heard nothing from Her Majesty, so I decided it was time that if she didn't want me to be her representative, I needed to declare full independence. So I did that on the 27th of February 2010, sent that declaration to all of the local authorities, the First Minister in Scotland, the Prime Minister in England, the Queen, President Obama, the United Nations. And none of those have replied, so I take it that they've got no objections. Under the Montevideo Convention, any people is allowed to declare their own independence. So that's what I've done. Well, the whole of what I'm doing has been about the rights that Shetland has and only needs to assert in order for them to become reality. The question is, when and how did Shetland become part of Scotland? Because it never happened. And the only answer they've got is, well, it's been like this for ages, you might as well just get used to it.
Well, we obviously moved from being part of Scandinavia to part of Scotland as the then Queen of Denmark or the King of Denmark presented us as part of as it were, a marriage settlement, and that happened in many hundreds of years ago, I suppose is the best way to put it. I mean, in some ways the dates are immaterial. At that point we became part of Scotland. I really don't think anything will be achieved by spending hundreds of thousands of pounds of public money in the Court of Session in Edinburgh disputing when we became part of Scotland. We are part of Scotland, we're part of the United Kingdom now. The crucial factor for Shetland is how we use the current constitutional debate to further the needs of our islands, our people, our economy, our future, and that's very much what we're going to do. I don't think we're going to spend lots of money in a court of law to do it.
Well, the sovereign position of Shetland is that it is part of Scotland and has been since 1469, subsequently of course part of the United Kingdom. As you know, the British Empire has acquired many lands over the years, and we're actually in the same position technically, historically, probably as the Falklands or the Isle of Man or any other island that through history has become British.
Well, it's a very intricate historical story, but in essence Shetland was part of a dynastic dowry between the respective monarchies in the two countries, as was Orkney, and we were effectively pawned over, if you like. But the pawning aspect of it has sort of disappeared into historical documentation, and a more realistic assessment of the situation is that we are part of Scotland, part of the United Kingdom, because historically that has been the precedent that has been laid down.
There is a grey area. Historians and lawyers are divided in, but what is clear is that Shetland was part of the Danish crown for 500 odd years, and then part of Scotland and subsequently part of the UK following the Act of Union in 1707. The fact of the matter is, by habit and repute, I guess, we're Scottish, we're also British, but the independence referendum in 2 years' time is going to give us an opportunity to open these things up again and have a look, and as far as I'm concerned, every option should be on the table for Shetland, and self-determination is extremely important. If Shetland votes to remain part of the UK, then I think part of the UK we should remain, and then following on from that, we need to look at what our status is within the UK, now whether it's a crown dependency, whether it's a Faroe-Denmark type relationship, or whether it's a status quo. I don't know, that's up for debate, but I think every option.
In order to hopefully give the people of Shetland the confidence to stand up for themselves, I have to do what I'm doing, so that when I'm successful in any of my endeavours with the different authorities, they can see, well, he's doing that, why can't I? Why can't I go on the road without road tax? Or why can't I build a house wherever I want to? Why can't I do what I want with my land? All of these kind of questions. It sounds a bit anarchic, and you have to have control in a society, you have to have rules, but at the same time you don't have to have the rules that are imposed by what I believe to be a completely corrupt government. Well, not only the UK, but particularly the European Union. Well, the Scottish nationalists, when they first were starting to come to prominence, were saying, well, yes, of course, if we get power, we will also devolve power to places like Shetland. Because Shetland is so very different to Scotland. You don't find tartan here, you don't find kilts, you don't find all the kind of things you expect to find on a Scottish island, because the roots of Shetland are in Norway. Everyone you talk to traces their roots back to Norway, unless they're incomers from Scotland. So the Scottish nationalists have really broken their promise. Alex Salmond, when he talks about Scottish energy, he's talking about Shetland's oil and Shetland's wind resource. Without those two, his figures don't stack up. Scottish independence is a nonsense.
It's a very divisive issue, but those issues happen in communities such as ours. They happen all over the United Kingdom, and I think the fact is that when oil and gas first arrived in Shetland in the mid-1970s, that was a pretty divisive issue as well, because it was going to always be about huge amounts of people coming into the islands to change Shetland for good, and it did. And I think most of the experience of oil and gas has been massively positive for my generation, indeed I would argue for every generation of Shetlanders. The Viking wind turbine proposal is again pretty divisive. Time will tell whether it's a good project or not for Shetland, but it's at least one that we should make up our own mind about, and we should decide how best it fits into our economy, fits into our social being, and indeed fits into the future of our islands. I don't think we need a referendum to know what we want. I think all we really strongly want is to be able to have more control over our own affairs, to make sure that decisions taken for Shetland are taken by the people who are best suited to speak for Shetland, and that's Shetlanders, not Scots or the UK. And that's the debate I think we're now having in the islands, and it's a very welcome one, because it allows us to look at what we can do more effectively, how we can make decisions that are appropriate for our local people in a way which I think is much more in tune with their needs, rather than the needs of, I don't know, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Peterhead, London, Basingstoke, any other part of the UK you want to talk about.
Any business, trade. So I think that that's not likely, but I would think that there are many ways in which Shetland could benefit by having a different constitutional arrangement with Scotland, while still remaining, if you like, Scottish. And I think the other islands, Orkney and the Western Isles, might well benefit as well. And in fact, Shetland Islands Council has always had this policy that greater autonomy, Norwegians used to have a system whereby farther north you lived, less tax you paid. So when you eventually got to Svalbard, people actually paid you to stay there. It's not quite the same as that now, but that's the principle. You can look at that, we have this scheme, as you know, for wind turbines and so on, but if we could get cheaper electricity, cheaper petrol and so on, with a bit of freedom in planning and so on, Shetland could contribute a lot more to the national pot as it does at the moment. So I think hopefully what the new Scottish government, whether it's part of the UK or independent, should look at is whether they could look at greater autonomy for the islands, because I think that would be a plus for both sides.
In that sense of being part of a political entity, yes.
But do you think most people in Shetland?
I don't think most. I think there's first and foremost a very strong Shetland identity, which is about being from Shetland, embodying Shetland values, and caring deeply about the place that people live in. Secondly, I think there's a wider sense in which most people recognise that we have very strong historical links, and also very strong personal links with Norway in particular, but with Scandinavia more generally. Some of those are historical. In the war, Shetland was the base for those boats that went to supply the Norwegian resistance against the Nazis. So local people were involved with helping in that. So strong interpersonal ties are maintained. The sense of historical identity is at least partly Norse because of the history, but also because of some of the aspects of Norse culture that you still see manifested in Shetland. Some of the street names, place names. The accent is very distinctive, which, although overlain with Scots, has its roots at least partly in Norse. So it's a very mixed identity, but I think people are realistic enough to know that we, when it comes to politics and state and government, that we are part of Scotland or the United Kingdom. They might not like to be, but that's where we are. I think if the wider question is how will Shetland vote in an independence referendum, I suspect probably against it. I have no evidence, it's just a hunch. But equally, I suspect that the whole of Scotland is going to vote that way too.
Well, I don't think we're ruling anything in or ruling anything out. I think what I'm saying is over the next 18 months, as we move towards the independence referendum, there's an opportunity for Shetland to stake its case, to look and see if indeed it would be better for us to change the way and to change our relationship within the United Kingdom. Crown dependency is one model. There are other models, as I've mentioned already, the Faroe Islands and their links with Denmark is another option. And I think we should have everything on the table, and we should be able to negotiate with both Edinburgh and London and find the best deal for Shetland.
Then you say
This whole matter has actually never been tested in the courts. When it is tested, there is absolutely no doubt that Shetland never has, and it is not, part of Scotland.